When Gimme Hope Joanna, sung by Eddie Grant, was written, it exposed how an unjust system hides behind moral authority while crushing ordinary people. That lie has not disappeared, it has only changed geography. In Iran today, an unelected clerical regime rules through fear, religious coercion, and violence, silencing anyone who dares to challenge it. The streets erupt because hope has been outlawed, dissent is treated as sin, and obedience is demanded in the name of God. Like the song's defiant plea, the message from Iran is blunt and unmistakable. People will not remain silent forever under a regime they never chose. Hello and welcome back to Newsline, brought to you by People's TV. In this news commentary, we turn our focus once again to the unfolding situation in Iran. As the situation in Iran unfolds, the protests have now entered a fifth day, continuing despite the regime's determined efforts to crush them. Observers around the world have been watching closely to see if the demonstrations would persist, and they have, showing no sign of slowing. Government officials are reportedly growing increasingly concerned that the unrest could spread throughout the country. The focus of the protests has shifted dramatically. What began as demonstrations over economic hardship and recession has now escalated into direct calls for the death of Ayatollah Khamenei, with protesters shouting, "Death to the Ayatollah." Clashes between the demonstrators and law enforcement, including riot police and other security forces, are ongoing, with many protesters being shot at or arrested. Despite the repression, the movement continues to grow in defiance and intensity. This video clip captures the protests in the city of Nurabad. As a journalist observing from Sri Lanka, I've noticed that such clips often tell a very different story than what Sri Lankan mainstream media presents. The coverage there appears to whitewash the Khamenei regime, portraying the Ayatollah as a leader striving to free the nation from Western imperialism. On the ground, however, the protesters' message has grown sharper. What began as chants of death to the dictator have now escalated to death to the Ayatollah. Khamenei's so-called divine regime has further restricted internet access in an attempt to block information from reaching the outside world. Despite these measures, Iranians are turning to VPNs and other tools to bypass censorship, sharing video clips that reveal the reality on the ground. In this video clip, crowds can be seen dropping a stone on the head of a police officer, while another clip shows security forces firing live rounds at protesters. Analysts are questioning how long the tyrannical Iranian government can maintain control over such determined demonstrators. Citizens are protesting not only against the regime itself but also against the law enforcement agencies that enforce its rule. These are not isolated incidents. The unrest is spreading across the country like wildfire. Once people rise up, no number of firearms can stop them. For decades, Iran has effectively been run as a business by the clerics, and the population has reached its breaking point. In another clip, police officers arrive on motorcycles to disperse protesters, while helicopters hover above to monitor their movements. Although the Iranian government claims that these police units succeeded in pushing back the crowds, the footage tells a very different story. In this video clip, police can be seen making arrests. While initial reports put the number at over 400, it is likely that more than 1,000 people have been detained by now. The footage shows armed law enforcement officers of the Iranian regime rounding up protesters and leading them to detention facilities. State-controlled media ominously warn that many of these young detainees may never see the light of day again. Iran has already executed over 1,500 citizens in October and November 2025 alone, and the regime routinely imprisons individuals for years without trial for even minor acts of dissent. Now, with masses being arrested simply for protesting, the same grim fate may await them. This video shows a young Iranian spraying a message on a wall that reads, "Khamenei, we will overthrow you." Such acts reflect deep public anger toward a regime that has repeatedly violated basic human rights and diverted the nation's oil wealth toward global terrorism instead of improving the lives of its own people. Protests are continuing even after nightfall, highlighting the level of public determination and desperation. If these demonstrations persist for several more days, protesters are likely to face far greater danger, as the regime may resort to using proxy terrorist groups operating beyond Iran's borders to suppress dissent. Despite these looming threats, the direction appears irreversible. A regime change is no longer a question of possibility, but of time. The protests are receiving support from local business owners, many of whom have closed their shops for the fifth consecutive day despite the inconvenience it causes them. In this video, protesters are once again being fired upon by armed law enforcement officers and soldiers loyal to the regime. It bears emphasizing that no government in the world has the right to use lethal force against civilians exercising their right to protest. Meanwhile, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has expressed solidarity with the Iranian protesters. Yesterday, former Prime Minister Naftali Bennett also publicly saluted their courage. In his statement, Netanyahu emphasized that any change in Iran must come from within the country itself, while highlighting Israel's ongoing efforts to counter the influence of terrorism emanating from the regime. The Prime Minister repeatedly stresses that Israel stands with the Iranian people and that, once the tyrannical government is overthrown, Israel will be ready to assist in supporting the nation's transition. Concluding his speech, the Prime Minister highlighted that these protests mark the beginning of a long overdue internal transformation in Iran and extended his congratulations to the Iranian people for the significant changes unfolding in their nation. If this report helped you see the situation on the ground clearly, don't keep it to yourself. Like, share, and subscribe to People's TV, where truth has no agenda, and facts speak louder than spin.
Subscribe us for more details.